Parks, schools, restaurants, and more, Assembly Row gets high scores. We're a thriving city with so much to do. Encore Boston Harbor in our view. Politics, cannabis, controversial stories, heroes, villains, who gets the glory? 50 plus languages in Somerville is spoken. Sanctuary city, there are no free tokens. The history in Somerville stays alive. In All-American City, we won 3 times. Somerville connects. Somerville connects. Good morning, everyone. We are now doing another edition of Somerville Connects. What's your Somerville story? And Dead Air Live, the longest live-running TV show in America, 4 months older than Saturday Night Live. Good morning, Rich Austin. How are you in this beautiful morning?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. So, Rich, you are such a fabulous human being who I recently met on the internet through a networking marketing forum. I'm not sure which one, but we met and you just cracked me up. You're a funny man, but you're also a very smart man and you have a lot to offer the world. So if you wouldn't mind, because I'm going to get to know a little bit about you as well as everyone else, take us on a little journey, who you are and what you're up to these days. Thank you.
I grew up in a very small town called Hazardville, Connecticut, which is obviously an odd name for a town, but it was named after a gentleman whose last name was Hazard, just a little bit south of Springfield, Mass. And the funny thing about Hazardville is Hazardville was the center of gunpowder manufacturing during the Civil War. And they produced about half of the gunpowder used by the northern side. It's just a little tiny factoid. Another interesting factoid is all 3 gunpowder manufacturing facilities all ended their life in the same way. They all blew up at one time or another. So that's how the gunpowder industry ended in the little town of Hazardville.
So it sounds like you came from an interesting town. Now, the town that you came from, it sounds like that there was a lot of warfare around it with gunpowder and, you know.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. We were one of, obviously the town was far enough north in Connecticut. It never really was involved in any of the Civil War actions. But yeah, it was a very small town. We had 1 traffic light.
One? Just one?
Just one. We had 3 or 4 churches, 2 liquor stores.
How many people? What was the population?
No idea, but it was small.
Okay.
And then, I went to high school, Enfield, Connecticut, which Hazardville kind of got incorporated into, and then college in Vermont, and then a career in the pharmaceutical biotech industry and R&D and regulatory affairs, that sort of thing. Married 2 wonderful children who are adults now, and right now I'm hunkering down just like everyone else because of the COVID-19.
Right. And we are doing the pandemic Zoom recordings because we are all homebound for the time being.
That's right.
Right. I see in your background, you have speaking of success.
Yes.
Tell us, what is that all about? Because you're a funny guy. And when I look at you, I think you're an actor. For some reason, you remind me of an actor. As a matter of fact, you remind me a little bit of George in Seinfeld. Has anyone ever told you that?
Uh, no, but people have told me I look like the Pillsbury Doughboy, uh, which is not exactly my favorite reference, but you go with what you have. Uh, yeah, I've been a pretty severe stutterer all of my life, and then as an adult, I finally got enrolled in a speech therapy program up at the University of Vermont, and took about 3 years of hard work, embarrassing situations. Uh, one of the one of the keys to stuttering is you have to not care if you
Oh.
stutter, which is very hard because once you have a lifetime of embarrassment, um, you really fear that next stutter where you look ridiculous. Uh, so it takes a year or two or three to get over that and realize it's no big deal. And uh, it was interesting. One of the breakthroughs that I had, my therapist, I was talking to him about having difficulty in a certain situation. Um, and he said, well, the next time that happens, instead of focusing on how horrible you're feeling, look at that person and try to figure out what they're feeling.
Oh,
And, and I
isn't that interesting?
and when I did that, it was amazing because they were in pain, just like I was.
Right.
You know,
My dad used to say, if you ever want to know how someone else is feeling, or if you're ever in a difficult situation, put yourself in their shoes, and you'll get a lot of clarity.
oh, absolutely.
So that's
You
pretty
know?
much what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, that's one of the practices that is really good in life. Like if someone does something bad to you when you're out driving, instead of screaming at the driver and waving one finger around, or you have to stop and think, what kind of day are they having that they're going to get that upset
Right.
over something this minor?
So what do you do?
I just sort of like shrug, and sometimes I'll wave to them full handed, you know and but that just put it put it away, because there's lots of other things you need to worry about other than somebody else's driving practices.
Well, when people display any kind of anger or frustration, it's really what I call wasted energy. Whenever I hear about a crime, I just say wasted energy. Like, why did someone even bother? They could have been doing something constructive, positive, or maybe learning how to speak of success and working with someone like you.
Smooth segue, very nice. So yes, anyways, back to what I was saying. The Speaking of success, so like I said, I was in the pharmaceutical biotech industry for quite a few years, traveled internationally quite a bit, auditing other studies. And then I was at a facility, um, big pharmaceutical manufacturer. And in 15 years, we got bought out by 8 different companies, which was it was a pretty ridiculous time to work there, because you never knew who your new boss was going to be. And business cards, oh my God, I got tens of thousands of business cards that I'll never use, because I had one box of 1,000 that we got bought out before that one was finalized. So yeah, never even became part of that company. Anyways, I made it through 7 of the 8 buyouts, and on the 8th one, I was at the age where I'd been there quite some time, and I was making really good salary, and somebody realized they could hire 2 younger individuals for what I was being paid. And so one day, a couple of very nice young men from the security department wanted to make sure I knew where I had parked my car, and they walked me out to,
Oh,
and that
were,
was
were,
the end of my career.
were you devastated?
Well, at the moment, yes. I'd never been fired before.
How old were
Yeah.
you when this happened?
Earl, mid 50s.
Men define themselves through their careers. They all do.
Yep.
It's just the way a man is wired. So I can't imagine what you felt. I can't imagine.
Well, I came home.
Did you
Right.
cry
Uh,
a little bit?
no, no, but it was interesting when they were explaining to me that my career was over. Uh, I got, how people say, well, their mouth is dry. Oh my God, I was so thirsty. I, my, I,
Yes.
I was parched.
Yeah, your
Uh,
body went into shock.
so I got home and told my wife, and we took a walk around the neighborhood, holding hands and talking about what we were going to do going forward. And it was fine. It actually, I hadn't realized how stressful the job had been until I was out of it. And so I decided, let's do something that I want to do.
So it was a
Um,
blessing in disguise.
absolutely. Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
So with my background, because I've always worked on my speech um, all of my life to maintain my fluency. And so I decided I love public speaking. I love to entertain. Funny
Yes.
thing is, I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was younger, in I worked at a Boy Scout camp for several years, and I stuttered, of course. However, when I got up in front of 300 or 400 campers to
Mm.
tell stories and jokes, not a stutter. I was perfect.
Really? Why do you think that is?
Because it wasn't Rich Austin up there. It was this entertainer. It was
Ah,
somebody else. It was this other individual. And, you read stories about some stutterers, they'll talk in like a French accent because then it's not them, it's somebody else.
right.
So, but as soon as I got off stage, it all came back. So I've always been an entertainer, and I figured, well, I've learned so much about public speaking and communication in general that I decided I was going to try this speaking of success thing. And the thing that really kind of surprised me was I'm creative. I never knew because I was always scientific, right? And when you're working with the Food and Drug Administration, they don't like you to be creative. It's
Well, a
just
little
the facts.
insight here. When you are scientific, science and music are very connected. Music, speech, acting, it's all intertwined.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that, without really knowing anything about you, that I found interesting. I thought you were very entertaining, funny, very easy to listen to because you were leading this forum, this network marketing forum, or networking, not network marketing, well, networking forum.
Right.
And you were fabulous. I was laughing. I said, this guy is funny. He is so ready for TV. So
Uh,
you're a natural. You had this probably inside of you and you pushed it down because you had to be analytical.
right. Right. And I spent a lot of my career working with engineers. And don't get me wrong, I love engineers. However, not the funniest group of people. So I always had to rein it back a little bit. So yeah, I started speaking of success, and it's fun because I've been able to learn more and more and more. One of my favorite quotes that I often use when I'm telling people why I do what I do is by George Bernard Shaw, who said, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion it has occurred.
Oh, isn't that interesting? So if you have to do your elevator speech and you met someone in an elevator, what is speaking of success? Do you teach people how to talk? Do you teach people how to write? Do you teach people how to communicate day to
Right.
day, or all of those things? What is it that you do for them? What do you offer them?
Well, it's all about effective communication. Whether you're going to be writing something that people are going to read, or you're going to be speaking to a group of people or one individual, one of the things that I tell folks is you have to have a plan. You have to know what it is you're going to say. You can't, we've all seen um, Facebook videos where somebody gets on and they talk for 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, which you will never get back, you haven't learned anything because they've just wandered the verbal landscape.
They were rambling. They were
Right.
rambling. Oh, I can't stand that.
And they never actually got to the point. So when I help people with communication, whether it's writing or speaking, I make sure they understand what it is they're trying to say, and then come up with a good, entertaining, easy way to say it. I'm not into using your big, long words um, because not everyone is in your field of study. Um, Not everybody's going to understand things that you say. Um, Interesting, when I was doing a lot of speaking overseas, I had this gentleman come with me one time who was also going to be presenting, and he was using baseball analogies in Italy. And these people had no idea what the point was because they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
play baseball.
Right.
Uh, and one of the fascinating things that I read recently was in the US, a lot of our sayings and language, uh, a lot of the gun culture has worked its way into our language, where we say, well, take a shot at it, or, all of these phrases that
Right.
they don't use anywhere else. And it's just fascinating how the society impacts the language. Uh,
That's really interesting. I can go off on a whole different tangent. I've been writing down these sayings. I have a notepad that's called sayings. My father always used to say, "My aching back." There was nothing wrong with his back, but he used to say it all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So I know exactly what you're saying. Speaking about sayings.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, because this is very interesting. Speaking of success, what is your tagline? Because I'm hearing a tagline, get to the point. Not you, but people in general. Get to the point. Is that what speaking of success is about?
For the most part, y- yeah. I don't really. It's funny because I'm like the um, cobbler whose kids don't have shoes. I help people come up with their taglines, but I don't really use one myself.
Get to the point.
Get to the
Because
point. It's a great tagline. Yeah.
it is, because this is what you're teaching people instead of rambling. A lot of people, again, I'll use the expression, they waste a lot of energy on Facebook talking about nothing.
Oh gosh.
I
Yeah.
don't have time for nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way I kind of gauge my time with people is if I feel that I'm growing and learning and moving in a positive direction, then it's extremely beneficial for the both of us to be together. And I'm not saying that people can't have problems, but if you're with the person that has the same problem and their problem hasn't changed in years, it's kind of like, give me a new problem because this is an old one. This is an old record.
Right.
Or you hear people just rambling on Facebook like blah, blah, blah. Get to the point. Boy, I'll tell you, a lot of people really need you, Rich. So do you
Well,
want me to call you Richard or Rich?
Rich or Richard is fine. Usually I go by Rich, but unfortunately it's a noun, not a verb. So we'll
Okay.
just yeah, we'll just go with Rich, I guess. So
Can you give me an example of someone that you've worked with or something that you've helped them to write? Because one of the things that you were promoting about yourself is that you can help people to come up with the verbiage that they need
right.
for video. So can you give us an example or a testimony of someone that you've worked with and the results?
Sure. I was working with this woman who she makes and sells homemade cleaning products, that sort of thing, because she's really hypersensitive to chemicals in the environment. A lot of people are, and she would go on and on about toxicity in the home and how horrible and scary it is, and her own personal experiences. And I mean, it was all important information, but that's secondary information. That's information for the follow up conversation once you've gotten their attention. Because you have to kind of get people's attention to get them to listen. Because unfortunately, for a lot of people, listening is waiting to speak. They're just,
Can I just absorb what you just said? Listening is waiting. I like that.
people are not listening. They're just waiting for you to stop.
By the way, that's another great tagline.
Yeah,
Listening is waiting to speak. That's really profound.
I didn't come up with it, but
And listen also has the same letters as silent.
that's right. Yeah. And the saying is you have one mouth and two ears. You should be listening twice as much, because you never learn anything when you're speaking.
You are absolutely right. I have to take that to heart as well. But I think I'm doing a good job listening to you, right?
Yes, because I love to talk, so I'm doing okay. So anyways, I was working with this young lady, and kind of like a tagline introduction sort of thing. And it hit me what she might want to say. So when somebody asked her, well, what is it you do, at a networking event, she now says, well, I help you get out of toxic relationships.
Oh, I like that.
And immediately, almost everyone is going to say, what do you mean?
Right. Her tagline could be get out of toxic
Right.
relationships. Yeah.
So the trick is, if you want somebody to listen to you, get them to ask a question, because they just ask the question, so they're waiting for the answer.
If you want someone to listen to you, you have to ask the right question.
No, get them to ask you a question.
Get them to ask you a question. Okay. Okay. All right.
So then when somebody says to her, well, I'm not in a toxic relationship, then she can say, well, do you wash your hair? Do you clean your house? Do you do all of these things? And then the added benefit is you've got them saying yes, yes, yes.
Right. And what happens when a person says yes, yes, yes? What happens? Because something gets triggered in the brain. Can you explain that?
Well, yeah. I mean, then you've got a dialogue going.
Mhm.
You have somebody who's now feeling like they're correct, because they're saying yes, they're agreeing with you, and you have that communication thing being established very quickly. So, like I said, one of the best ways to get people to listen to you is don't lecture to them. Get them to ask you a question. If you can say something that's going to get them to ask you a question, then they're obviously listening for the answer.
Boy, this is very insightful. I love this. Fabulous. Fabulous. So, how long have you been doing Speaking of Success?
Oh, probably 8 or 9 years now.
And this young lady that you're speaking of, how have you working with her, how has it changed her life or her
Well,
business?
yeah, it enables her to feel more comfortable because, again, when I help people, when I coach them, if they're not comfortable in the communication process, the person they're trying to talk to is going to recognize that. They're going to feed off of that. They're going to be uncomfortable. And then you really don't have a good situation. So one of the big keys is if you can be comfortable, then the person you're talking to is going to be comfortable. And that really eases the communication process.
I like that. You are so worldly and full of wisdom.
Yeah, I'm not sure my children would agree with that, but
Well, they say that when someone lives with you, they see every side of you, but that doesn't make you less worldly or having less wisdom. Okay?
well,
I'm just saying.
you know the old Mark Twain story where Mark Twain left home when he was 17 or 18, and he liked to say when he left home his father was the dumbest person on the planet, and when he came home 7 or 8 years later he was amazed how much the old man had learned.
That's funny. He's really speaking about himself.
Yeah, right. So yeah, the whole communication process to me is pretty fascinating. Have you ever heard the numbers 55, 38, 7?
No, I have not. Do
Um,
tell.
it's a it's a theory of communication where 55% of the communication process is through the tone of your voice, and 38% is through your body language, and 7% is through the words you use,
55%
the
is through
tone
the
of your
tone
voice.
of your voice, 38% is through your body language, and 7% is through the words that you use.
Correct. Now, a lot of your speech experts, and when I say speech experts, I'm not talking about speech therapists. I love speech therapists. They're wonderful people. I'm talking about people like me. Um, they will quote that study. Um, and I used to quote that study, but I kept thinking about it. How can that be? So I researched that study, and come to find out, it was done in the late 60s in California, University of Berkeley, I think it was. Um, and the interesting thing was the person who was doing the study was looking at emotional communication. And it was only done in women because back then women were emotional. Um,
That is, I have something to say, but never mind. Go ahead.
okay, yeah. We'll just put it in the time frame that it was and say, okay. But what he was looking at was how much emotion could they communicate? Well, if somebody is standing in front of you with tears streaming down their face and their voice is out of control and all they're doing is hiccuping and well, yeah, 7% of their the words don't matter at all. You're getting all of the communication, the emotional communication through the tone of their voice and their body language.
I hear where you're going with this, or I see where you're going with
Right.
this.
So that's what that study looked at. But people look at that study and they just say, well, oh, so the words you use don't matter. That's ridiculous. So if I were to have perfect body language and perfect tone of voice, and I was speaking to you right now in Japanese, you should understand 93% of what I'm saying, right?
You are absolutely right. Because when I had my concession stand in Boston and I was on the waterfront, I could convey what they could convey with me, and I would understand what they were saying by their body language and the tone of their voice.
Right,
I didn't know what they were saying.
right.
They didn't know what I was saying, but if you point to things and you smile and you have a certain tone, okay. Wow, Rich, this is fabulous. This is fabulous information. As I was saying, I could communicate with someone when I was at my concession stand. So
Right. Yeah.
carry on. Yes.
But that was an extremely limited communication. You could not have been talking about them about, or you could not have been talking with them about philosophy.
No.
You know what I mean? You could only, that was, how much is that? And, I want that. So that's the sort of thing where the 55-38-7 works. But for actual business type communication or personal communication, that 55-38-7, if somebody tells you, well, this is why, this is the communication process, no, it's not. The words you use, even though they're worth less, that makes them more important because people are going to have to know what it is you're saying.
So do you teach people how to use their body when they speak?
Yes. And for most people, it's pretty natural.
Right.
Once in a while, you'll get somebody who's not good at it. That's fine. I saw this great video of a presidential debate with Barack Obama versus I forget who it was he was running against. John Kerry, I think it was, or
Oh, yes. I believe you're right. Yes.
uh, but the interesting thing was they were both trying to outdo each other with body language. When they shook hands on the stage, well, one of them put the hand out first. So they won that point. But the other one, when he shook his hand, put his hand on his shoulder. And, well, then he won that point.
Correct.
So,
What do you make when someone they shake their hand and they put their hand over the other person's hand?
well, they're trying to convey intimacy, trust, that sort of thing, which can be a little bit difficult because some people don't accept intimacy that easily,
Mm.
that quickly. Um, so I just tell folks, just go in for the regular warm handshake, um, unless it's a certain situation. If you're at a funeral, something like that. But in a business setting, let the other person set the tone at first, and then as you warm up to each other.
Oh, so why do you want the other person to set the tone so they feel comfortable?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
They're in control.
I've often heard that if you want to be in a situation when you go into a business situation, you always mimic what they're doing with their body, the other person's doing.
Yeah, that's called mirroring, and I agree with that somewhat. I think it can be a little bit gimmicky. If you're doing it to make the other person feel at ease, that's one thing. But if you're doing it to sort of game the conversation, I kind of don't
Yeah,
agreed with that philosophy all that much.
it's kind of phony. You have to be
Yeah,
yourself,
right,
is what you're
right,
saying. Be yourself, be
right,
authentic.
right.
So, you've been doing this for 8 or 9 years. You gave us an example with the woman with the toxic relationships. Are you in a toxic relationship? Who else have you worked with? Give us another example of a guy.
Okay. Um, I was working with a gentleman who he was a photographer,
Mhm.
just out of the military, and well, he wanted to be a photographer, and we got talking. One of the things I try to encourage to find out is what makes you special, because everybody is special in some way.
Absolutely.
Do you have a story? Do you have a background?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. And so his job in the military it was an awesome job. He got to blow things up.
Wow.
Yeah, that was his job.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to take out a bridge, you go out and you set explosives, and then you back away and you press the button or whatever the trigger is.
Sure.
And you've only got one shot to get that right. Because if it doesn't blow up, guess who gas has to go out and figure out why it didn't blow up? Him.
And
You
and
know,
and it could be dangerous because you could go back out there and
and
kaboom.
and then it does blow up.
Right.
You know, so he learned. You know, he only had one shot to get it right,
Right.
and so he carried that over to his photography business. If I'm doing your wedding, I've got one shot to get it right.
Oh, absolutely.
And I have trained to make sure that I put everything in place correctly. So we're going to get it right.
It's sort of like your first impression. That's it. You either make it happen or you don't.
Yeah, there was a study, I think, out of Harvard. If you make a bad first impression, it can take 7 or 8 follow-up interactions to overcome that.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Wow. That's a lot.
because um, people gain their first impression of you in seconds.
Okay, here's something to ask you because speaking of success, they say it takes a lifetime to earn respect with the person, and in one instant you can lose it all. Right?
Right.
Let's say if a person falters and they get in trouble, something catastrophic happens and they go down the wrong path and they have lost the trust and respect of their peers and their friends. How can you help that person to get back on track, to regain the trust of everyone that they lost because this person did something catastrophic? Let's say and I don't know of anyone that's done this, but let's say that they've murdered someone. They're finally out of prison and everyone, they still have that, that X on them and people are judgmental. Is there anything that you can do to help a person that's had a catastrophic situation, or is there no hope for them?
Well,
Sorry to put that on you, but
yeah, no, no.
I'm going to
Uh,
the extreme here.
yeah, the first thought that pops into mind is I could not do that alone. That would take a community,
A
if you will.
village, it would take a
Right,
village.
right,
Okay.
of individuals who were willing to help this person out.
Mm.
Um, yes, the communication process is part of that. But interestingly enough, as I'm sitting here thinking of it, I would probably work more with the village than with him.
Oh, I see. Very interesting. And what would you do with the village?
I would point out the obvious things, um, kind of like, well, who's going to throw the first stone here, guy? Your house is made of glass, that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, it just to help people understand that usually one act does not define an individual.
Well, it
Usually.
usually, unless the act is so out there.
Right. I worked with a local college, teaching at night at an adult correctional institution.
Oh, okay.
Men that were going to be getting out soon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the interesting things that I found out, because I trained, if you will, a couple of thousand individuals over the 10 years.
Train them for speaking of success, or
No, actually, this was in another lifetime, training them in OSHA construction safety.
oh, okay.
Was another little side thing that I
Mhm.
was doing. And, the goal was they would have a little bit of extra certification. So when they got out of jail,
Mhm.
they could land a job. Um, and working with these guys, I found out that probably 80% of them uh, made really stupid choices.
Right.
And most of that was due to alcohol,
Oh.
drugs,
Mhm.
um, you know, influence. If you're strung out on drugs and or alcohol, your decision making process is going to be a little bit off.
Yeah, it's out of balance.
Right. Uh, and a lot of these people, of course, low education, low income, um, don't get me started on the criminal justice system here in the US because, yeah, it's got issues.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues. Okay, so let's change the topic. Who would be your ideal prospect, your ideal client? Who are you looking for? Who is Rich Austin looking for?
Um, re- I'm sorry, I love to tell stories. Reminds me of something I heard on NPR where they had they were talking with a gentleman in Tunisia who was going to a networking event,
Mhm.
and they said to him, who do you hope to meet tonight? And he said, a drunk investor.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
You know,
That's funny.
which I thought, well, that's pretty universal.
Right.
So who would I like to meet? No, not a drunk investor, but I often tell people when they say, well, Rich, who can I introduce you to? I say, well, if you meet somebody and you ask them what it is they do, and they tell you, and when they're done, you have no idea what they do, have them call me.
Oh, okay. Very good. Yes, I love it. Okay, so give me a short blurb. I know what you do with the speaking. Tell us what you do to help them with the writing, because you have speaking, writing, presenting. Well, how do
Right.
you help them with the writing?
Well, it's interesting lately because of the um, in COVID-19, a lot of people have been putting out more social media, um, trying to stay in touch with their existing customers as well as future customers. And 72% of people that go on the internet for information want to see video. They want their information provided to them through video instead of reading something.
Right.
So I've been writing a lot of video scripts for people. because you, and I keep them short. I keep them about 2 minutes. Studies show, depending on the social media platforms, studies show 4 minutes tops, but shorter is better. So I limit these video scripts to about 2 minutes, and I interview the individual before I write it up. And I ask them, what is it you're trying to say? You know, what is the point you're trying to get across?
Get to the point.
Right. And like I just did one for somebody recently, and she had like 6 or 7 points. And I said, no, no, 2, 3 maybe. People can't hold more than 2 or 3 and in their minds. And you have to focus on, what are you good at? What do you think the people who are listening to you need or want to hear?
Mm-hmm.
And also, what makes you the money? I mean, if you're talking about something that brings in 2% of your income, then shut up about that, because you're wasting your time if you're in business.
So you're saying if you get 2% of your income, what I just, you kind of lost me there.
Okay. You know, people might do 10 different things in their business.
Sure.
And they're kind of excited about this new thing.
Sure.
But it's only ever going to bring in a tiny bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got the opportunity to get in front of somebody, either in person or through video, you have to talk to them about what it is that's going to make you money, because
Right.
you're in business.
Of course. Yes.
You know, and if this is just a tiny little thing, either nobody needs it or somebody else does it a lot better than you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so stick to what it is you do well.
Right.
Stick to what it is that makes you money.
Mm-hmm.
Stick to what it is that you think people need. With the video scripts, I've been writing those, and I make sure that I ask what it is that you know, what's the point that you want to get across,
Mm-hmm.
and then we work through it. I've always enjoyed writing. I'm not the world's best writer, but I get better every year because people get worse.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, that sounds great. All right. So you're presenting. Do you teach people how to dress? I mean, does this all part of the package? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, obviously, I will encourage people to dress for the occasion. I actually have a couple of individuals that I can call on who that's what they do. You know, they help people style themselves.
Oh, that's good. So you have a team of
Yeah.
people that you work with. If you can't offer them a service, you have someone that you know that can.
Right. And if somebody wants to do a video, I can write the script for them, but I have people that know a lot more about video, about podcasts, about lighting,
Sure.
about
Sure.
sound, you know, that sort of thing. And
Like someone like me.
I can connect them. Exactly. Right.
Got it. Good. Good. Okay. So your final words, how can people find you? How would you like people to find you? Are you in the website? Do you have a Facebook, Instagram? What is your modality?
Well, I'd like people to find me in GQ, a magazine, but they won't. But yeah, so you can find me at my website, speakingofsuccess.us.
Okay. Speaking of success.us, we can find
.us.
Rich Austin. Yep.
Yeah. And email info@speakingofsuccess.us.
And does it make any difference where anyone is located, or you could do business anywhere around the world?
Do business anywhere. as long as the one thing that I can't do, and I've tried and failed horribly at it, if you want me to help you with your accent, I can't do that. It-
Oh,
that
okay.
takes
Okay. Right.
real specific skills.
Right.
I know. I tried and crashed and burned. So
And
yeah,
where are you located? What neck of the woods? You're in Rhode Island or
yes,
Massachusetts? You're in Rhode
I
Island.
am in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Okay.
Uh,
In the United States, just in
yep,
case someone's looking at this in Europe. So we're in the United States,
exactly.
Warwick. I can't,
Yep,
that's a hard word. Warwick, Rhode
correct,
Island, which is
correct.
the eastern part of the United States.
That's where we are.
Right. Cool. Well, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you today and listening to your wisdom, which you have a lot, what you do. Who
Thank
is
you.
Rich Austin? Speaking of success, get to the point, right? Get to the point.
Pretty much, yes.
Rich, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And folks, thank you for listening. And bye for now. We'll see you at the next episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Somerville connects. Somerville connects.